Hey everyone, so we all really need to start paying meticulous attention to the kind of rhetoric, to the kind of articles, to the kind of propaganda and legislation that the ruling / media class in this country have been putting forth and presenting recently. And I'm very suspicious of the fact that this is all coming to fruition. This is all coming to a head at a moment that looks like they're getting ready to prepare for the 2019 elections. While Trudeau is off distracting the people with his scripted and acted out tear-filled apology tour, and during his global travels promoting this feminist SJW agenda that's seeking to have equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity, that collective race to the lowest common denominator, forced subjugation, collectivism, socialism, fascism, communism, basically the newest iteration of that authoritarian mindset, where everybody gets to finish the race at the exact same time and everyone gets participation awards. While he's out doing that shit, his mindless minions have been busy trying to create legislation and propaganda that will eliminate any dissenting voices or any dissenting views or alternative opinions, whether it's in the news and media landscape or in the online social media sphere. It seems like they're hard at work putting in a tremendous amount of time and effort to squash or quell any external voices. They don't want anyone to rock the boat because they want to be able to carry on unimpeded or unencumbered while they try to railroad over the population, not just of Canada, but even in the trading partners that they're trying to deal with. They're trying to railroad over any semblance of meritocracy and about competence and making sure it's all about equality of outcome. Yeah, we've seen this kind of shit before, folks, which is why we have to be on guard and paying very meticulous attention to the kind of things that these people are trying to espouse or the kind of legislation that they're trying to implement. Not sure if you've heard of Canada the Land Show. Graham Gordon is a contributor, a regular contributor to this Canadian publication, and he's pointing out some very important aspects of the media landscape, the establishment media landscape in Canada. He's pointing out some very important factors that Canadians really need to know and learn about. Headline: The Curious Case of Maclean's Government Grants. As the Liberals prepare to expand the Canada Periodical Fund, we look at the vagaries of an opaque system. According to figures disclosed by Canadian Heritage, Rogers Media's Maclean's magazine received virtually the same amount of government funding in 2017 as it had for years past, despite cutting nearly 3/4 of its print issues at the start of the year. So I wasn't even familiar with this totally prior to this, and thank goodness for Graham pointing this stuff out. Maclean's magazine is subsidized. So when you go to buy it or you go anywhere where you see it, like in these doctor offices and stuff, you're fucking paying for this shit. You're being forced to pay for it whether you like it or not, Canada. Unbelievable, right? Like I say, we're just scratching the surface here. For the annual funding cycle running from April 1st, 2017 through March 31st, 2018, Maclean's was given a $1.492 million grant from the Aid to Publishers program of the Canadian Periodical Fund. That was just slightly less than the $1.5 million it had received in each of the previous 6 cycles when it was a weekly magazine with approximately 44 issues per year. Last January, it had dropped down to a monthly. The reason, according to Heritage spokesman John Schofield, is that because of its high circulation, Maclean's could have received significantly more than $1.5 million in previous years. If the program's maximum of financial assistance had been higher in 2017-2018 due to reduced paid circulation, the awarded amount is less than the maximum amount of financial assistance. Blah, 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 right? In a way, that makes sense, but it also points to questions concerning the vagaries of a grant system that sits at the center of Canadian magazine publishing, a system that the Canadian Press reports today the governing Liberals are expected to expand to take in daily newspapers and digital outlets. Shows a tweet from Melanie Jolie. We are currently reviewing the Canada Periodical Fund to make sure it can support magazines and local papers to innovate, adapt, and transition to digital. I mean, think about it. If you're a business owner Doesn't matter what particular sector of the economy you're in. It's up to you to do this shit on yourself. Don't ask or seek out government to use the power of government, force, compulsion, mandates, and edicts to compel Canadians to bail out these failing media establishments. The reason why they're failing is because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not holding power to account. That's why no one wants to support them anymore. But yet the Canadian taxpayer is going to be forced to bail out the very people that they're saying, hey, I don't want to fucking support these dipshits. But the Canadian government, the Liberals, are saying, well, you're going to fucking have to whether you like it or not. You're going to have to pay for your own propaganda, Canada, whether you like it or not. Schofield, for example, explains that Heritage Program officers determine funding amounts for publications based on criteria outlined in the application guidelines. Fuck, that sounds so much like as if we live in a pure communist fucking country, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Or a full socialist country. Same shit, different pile, you know? Potato, potato. Tomato, tomato. Fuck. All collective ideologies. All based on forced subjugation. The criteria, however, appears fuzzy, and the guidelines contain no clear formula for funding. Well, of course not, because it's all just a matter of preference, right? Determined and dictated by the ruler of the day. Skipping on down a little bit here. Part of the guidelines explain how for paid magazines like Maclean's and The Walrus, only copies sold through subscriptions and newsstands count in determining their federal funding amounts. Yet according to the government proactive disclosures, The Walrus saw its grant increase from $291,850 in 2016 to $312,502 in 2017, despite the magazine's qualified paid copies steadily decreasing over the 2 previous years. Now I'm going to move on to an article, but I just wanted to point out, so The Walrus and Maclean's both. You're paying for them whether you like it or not, Canada. And like I say, thanks to Graham for pointing this stuff out to us. We really need to learn these things. It's very important that Canada understands just how deep this rabbit hole goes. Moving on. This is out of the Financial Post. Another headline. This is a recent headline as well. Ottawa poised to offer financial assistance to newspapers in upcoming budget. All signs point to print media getting a much needed financial assist from the federal government in the next budget. So in addition to some of these smaller media outlets, now the federal Liberals are looking to bail out. Yeah, that's what it is, to bail out. When you force taxpayers to subsidize or pay for the paychecks of these people that are supposed to be into private companies, private corporations, private businesses that are supposed to be all about holding government to account. That's it. That's the double-sided fucking coin there, right? You're going to be forced to pay for and subsidize these institutions by the government and then expect that these institutions, these media outlets, to hold government to account. Government's the one forcing you to bail them out. Do you think they're really going to want to hold government to account when government's literally the one that's forcing you to bail them out? Don't you think objectivity will be completely eliminated and absent of anything they espouse through their print or online digital media? Well, fuck, of course it does. And if you don't, well, I got some oceanfront property in Arizona I want to sell you if you're that naive. Ottawa, all signs point to print media getting a much needed financial assistance from the federal government in the next budget. The financing is expected to be doled out through the Canada Periodical Fund, which currently assists print magazines, non-daily newspapers, and digital periodicals. Heritage Minister Mélanie Joly reportedly discussed the matter during a meeting Thursday with representatives of the Fédération Nationale de Communication, which represents 7,000 people who work in culture and communications. So once again, like I say, it's looking like they're basically trying to, and I mean, if you think about the conversation that Trudeau's been trying to have with some of these big social media platforms like Facebook and such, they're literally trying to eliminate or quell any dissenting voices so that they can have the Ministry of Truth, the propagandist arm of the government, so entrenched that it encompasses the entire media landscape in this country. Think about what that means, Canada. Think about what that truly means for independent journalism. You know, there are people out here, there are those of us in the social media sphere that are trying desperately to counter this bullshit. But we don't have, you know, we don't have the capacity to force people to pay for our ventures, our initiatives, So we're always and forever going to be at a major disadvantage when you have this kind of shit taking place. Now, I'm going to go into a next article because I'm trying to tie this video up before we get to the half-hour mark, but I'm going to go into another video that completely ties in with this shit. This is a CBC article. Montreal, how law enforcement is struggling to control hate in an online world. Police signal zero tolerance, reminding social media users comments made online can have legal consequences. And as you can see from the picture that they posted for this article, it's all about fear and intimidation. It's all about, you better shut the fuck up and get online, or we'll use the full force and power of government on your ass if you dare to speak up in opposition, if you dare to speak openly against us. How dare you say 2 + 2 is 4? We're telling you it's 5, and god damn it, you better admit that it's 5. You better say it's 5, or else. Since the fatal shooting last year of 6 men in a Quebec City mosque, police in the province have taken a more aggressive stance against online hate speech. Within a week of the January 29th shooting, 3 people were arrested, 2 in a Montreal area and 1 in Quebec City, and accused of making threatening comments on social media about Muslims. All right? Very familiar pattern. M103, anti-Islamophobia. Right? Think about where this is going, folks. Think about who the government's currying favor for and who they're trying to oppose. As in the naturalized citizens of Canada. The very people that make up the demographic that's a representation of the history of this country. You're the one that's being oppressed. You're the one that's being opposed. You're the one that the government is seeking to squash and quell your voices. While defending, and as we've seen, like I say, we've seen, there's many examples that, you know, these Muslims or these special interest groups or the people that now curry favor from the central planning dipshits in government, we're seeing that they can cross the border illegally, they can plunder the Canadian populace by getting medical, dental, you know, all forms of healthcare, welfare, jobs. The government will cater to them on a continual and ongoing basis, but if you're Canadian, if you're a naturalized citizen of this country that has a heritage and an invested interest in this country, yeah, they don't give a fuck about you. These people are fucking sellouts. These globalists will sell anybody up the river for the sake of creating this one world order, this one world form of governance where the entire globe lives under forced subjugation and slavery. Like I say, I'm not a huge fan of just pure blind nationalism, but yeah, if you're a Canadian, you know, I'm not saying to be a fucking, like, just a pure blind nationalist, but yeah, if you care about this country in any way, shape, or form, and you have people that are going to have to live in this country, you know, for many years, many decades to come, you really need to start concerning yourself with this shit. And once we get to the point, if we allow these dipshits to completely take over and control the internet, that one last bastion where freedom actually exists, if they have the capacity or the power, or if we allow it to happen, if you allow it to happen, because I sure shit ain't sitting back and allow it to happen, but if you allow it to happen, Canada, that they get to take over and dominate the social media sphere in the internet age, you know, that wild, wild west where a little bit of freedom still exists, if that gets eliminated, well, we're just back to, once again, the only voices, opinions you'll hear subsequent to that will be the same shit you would have heard in the airwaves and on television once that became monopolized by special interest groups, crony corporations, and government propagandist mouthpieces. The internet, we at least have the capacity and the ability to push back and to speak up and speak out against this stuff. But if the government gets their way, well, you will no longer have that venue. You will no longer have that tool at your disposal. And once you've lost any semblance of being able to speak out and speak openly, well, like I've said in past videos, the rest of your freedoms, you might as well kiss them goodbye now, because they are going to follow suit. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.